Welcome to WCIT's 25th World Congress on Information and Communications Technology. On behalf of the World Information Technology and Services Alliance, WCIT, the Bangladesh Computer Samiti, the government of Bangladesh, in particular, Minister Zunit Ahmad Palak, the Minister of State for the Information and Communications Technology Division of Bangladesh, the entire ICT community of Bangladesh, as well as the citizens of Bangladesh and all the delegates viewing this session, we welcome you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Sir Tim, do you mind if I call you Tim?
Tim is good.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so Tim, you're famous for inventing the World Wide Web. There may be a few viewers who may not be exactly familiar with what the World Wide Web is, so please take a moment and explain what the World Wide Web is for them and how it differs from the internet, please.
So when you go to a website, when you go to one of these things, where in your browser you have http:// then you're using the web. When you use a web browser like Firefox or Chrome or Safari, then you're using the web. You're exploring the space of information. And that was what I designed more than 30 years ago. But now, yes, good question. What's the difference between that and internet? If you were born recently, they've both been around. But back then, in 1989, there was no web. There were no websites. There was no web browsers. The internet existed. That is to say, the computers across the world were connected together there were cables, and there were programs running on those computers which would send packets of information. So if you're a programmer, or if you knew what you're doing, you could log into one computer from another. There was but the programs for using the internet really weren't very sophisticated, and you certainly couldn't click your way through the web. I felt that we had so much interesting information on different computers, and we had the internet starting to connect them all up. I thought, why don't we just turn all that existing information into a web, make it really easy to access?
Thank you. So, Tim, I'd like to go back in time, which I'm sure the audience is going to be quite interested, to your early days. So, what kind of childhood did you have, and what were your interests? Were you a good student? Any childhood memories you'd like to share with us?
Well, I had what I regard as a great childhood. I was one of four, the eldest of four. Both of my parents were mathematicians, and both of my parents were actually involved. They met on the team building one of the first UK commercial computer. And so my mother was, they called her the first commercial computer programmer. And so the world for them was very new and exciting, and I picked some of that up. They were, of course, they were mathematicians because nobody studied computer science at that point, but they were using their maths to build this machine, and they knew that the machine was, as a computer, it would do whatever you program it to do. And that feeling of excitement and that challenge was something I picked up, I think, and sort of energized me.
Mm-hmm. So you were very fortunate to be brought up living and breathing technology. You also built a computer out of an old television. Why and how did you do this? And what functions did that computer serve?
Well, when I was in high school, I played with electronics. And electronics, initially, it meant transistors. Well, when we were very small, it meant making relays out of iron and wire. And then as you got bigger, then the electronics you could build, you could buy in a store, got more and more sophisticated. And then just as I was coming into college, it got to the point where you could actually buy the processing unit for a computer, this 2-inch long thing. You could actually buy that. It was, you have to save your pocket money. So you could buy the whole central processing unit for a computer. Then you had to build the rest of it. You need something for a screen. So I got an old television. You had to build a bunch of electronics between this, for the memory and the paper tape reader and paper tape punchers and things. And so there there was quite a lot of stuff to design, but I was into electronics. I also like the autonomy of having my own computer. So just as I was going through, in the 70s, as I was going through university, at the same time, meanwhile, this project was to have a very simple computer, but one that I controlled myself.
So looking back, were there any events or turning points in your life where your life changed or took a different direction?
Well, there weren't any sort of massive, sort of hair-raising changes of direction. But one thing I do remember, which may have prompted me to go and design my own computer, was that a buddy and I were using one of the serious computers in the nuclear physics lab we were using it for a rather frivolous purpose. We were using it to support the workings of a charity club. So we're just printing out. So we're using the big printer in the nuclear physics building to print off stuff for this the student rag week, student charity, and we were caught and we were thrown off the computer, and so that kind of hurt. And so we didn't have the use of that computer, so maybe that being deprived of access to quite a nice computer meant that was a motivation to be my own boss and have my own computer.
Excellent. So Tim, you earned a degree in physics and you received honorary doctoral degrees. You were knighted by Queen Elizabeth and received the prestigious Turing Award, among many, many others. You went on to invent one of the most significant inventions in history, the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web continues to spark innovation, creativity, and collaboration. It continues to change the world. Fortunately, for the benefit of the world, you chose to provide the source code for free to make the web an open and democratic platform. On behalf of the world, we thank you for that. But please tell us what led up to you inventing the World Wide Web.
So it was. I was lucky enough to join a number of companies, and then and worked with some consultants, in this world in which little microcomputers were new and exciting. And then I got to go to CERN, the high energy physics lab. CERN is this lab it has huge machines deep underground. If you get to go to Geneva, Switzerland sometime, make sure you should go and visit it, because it's a great fun place. It's exciting because there's also people trying to solve really difficult problems. And those people have serious workstations to do their work and to control. Also, they had serious computers to control the physics devices, the accelerators and the experiments. But they had these computers, but they didn't use them they didn't actually use them for documentation, and they didn't have systems. They didn't have a way of really using them for the collaboration. Right, just now you go to all kinds of websites for collaboration to collaborate. We could, but now they didn't have collaborative programs. They just had physics programs, and I was frustrated. I was working with all these different people. They had different sorts of computer, and they had to, in order to figure out what they were doing, I had to learn a different documentation system, a different documentation control system for each computer system that I came across, and there were a lot of those. So it was partly out of the frustration, and for my projects myself, I also wanted people to be able to. I would have this. I wanted them to have some text with links, which they could very, 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 very powerfully use in order to design things and in order to collaboratively design these new projects.
Tim, I'd like to veer off of the type of questions you are ordinarily asked during such interviews and test out a hypothesis on you.
Mm-hmm.
Before I do, however, I'd like to ask you a question. When you invented the World Wide Web, did you have any idea it would become what it is today?
Well, I did. I hoped that it would be really useful and would take off. And I designed it to be universal. So I'd seen lots of systems that people had designed which would only work on one computer, or you could only use them in English, or you could only use them for tree-structured systems, or only use them for matrix-oriented systems. And so I knew that the World Wide Web had to be, if I was going to ask people things on the web, I couldn't ask anything else. So the system had to be universal. You had to be able to use it no matter what computer system you had, no matter what language you spoke, no matter what sort of network you connected through, no matter what ability or disability you had. So universality was key in the original design. And I did call it the World Wide Web. But I had, of course, no idea that it would be successful.
I asked Dr. Vince Cerf and Dr. Bob Kahn, the co-founders of the internet, that same question. Here's what Dr. Cerf said. I don't think we had in mind such an outcome at the outset. It was not even clear that the idea would even work. Bob Kahn said, I would say that the ideas behind the internet architecture and protocol were solid. However, putting them into practice is another thing entirely. And this was not our goal originally. So here's my hypothesis. The ICT industry as we know it today was created by technology as opposed to traditional industries being established due to needs and demand. The ICT industry stemmed primarily from two monumental inventions, the internet and the World Wide Web. Both technologies, a global open network accompanied by a universal navigatable web addresses grew exponentially on that network, creating the ICT industry. Further, the ICT industry, unlike most industries, is not grounded in any business models dreamt up by internet pioneers such as yourself. Rather, the burgeoning industry was allowed to grow and flourish without any preset notions or directions due to the openness, boundlessness of the infrastructure that was created. Let me give you an example. The medical industry is a good example of a traditionally established industry. This industry began in response to people having medical needs. So an industry developed to respond to that demand. And accordingly, when a person decides to enter that medical profession, they choose career paths such as internal medicine, nursing, and the like. Employees in that industry have a clear understanding of the industry, why it exists, because the underlying vision of the and mission of the industry is well known. In the case of the ICT industry, I'm not aware if there was ever any clear business case for it to be established from the onset. Therefore, the use of technology did not have a clear commercial direction, nor did it provide guidance for people on how or why to choose it as a career. Further, if they did choose it for a career, they did not have clear guidance or principles set by the industry for them to follow. So to validate my hypothesis, I often ask young people in our industry to tell me what their career goals are and what they wish to accomplish through their careers. Their answers vary, however, with some exceptions, most wish to create the next killer app and become the next billionaires. Your thoughts?
Well, it may be that the ICT industry was, you described of being sort of accidental, as things are occurring accidentally. But what started, for me, the web was a very deliberate creation, I suppose. And the moment that I got it going, because it so depends on everybody uses the web, everybody programs web browsers and web servers. They need to all agree on the same protocol. So, HTTP protocol, the HTML standard, and so on. And so the moment it got going, I knew we had to have a consortium of all the companies involved. And so we started WCC, which is you can find at w3.org, and it is still going great guns, making lots and lots of standards for the web. And the mission of WCC was and is to lead the web to its full potential. So we had, and so we, at WCIT meetings, you'll find one person from each company. And by the way, if you're listening to this, the company hasn't joined WCIT, you could think about joining it. It would be a good idea, as well as joining WCIT. WCIT develops standards, but also with a very strong sense of purpose, leading the web to full potential means through the Web Accessibility Initiative, making sure that the web is as good as it possibly can be for people with who have varied accessibility problems. So there are guidelines and there are groups about accessibility. We have groups about internationalization from the get-go. If you produce a spec which works fine, but actually only works for English-speaking people, go back to the drawing board. So the values like accessibility, like internationalization, have always been important, and right now, for some diversity and inclusion are also the current work in the Solid community has a strong diversity and inclusion group, which reviews the directions, reviews the use cases. So when people propose a new technology, it is reviewed against these values. So I think with WCC and with not to mention the Web Foundation, which we started in a way perhaps because of looking at the disparity, realizing that the people who had the web were really empowered, and everybody who got access to the web was given a huge leg up compared to anybody who haven't. So we realized that by making the web a better platform, it was increasing the digital divide. Every time we made the web more powerful, we made the difference between the people who have the web and the people who don't have the web more greater. And so we started the Web Foundation to specifically address that issue, both to get people online as quickly as possible, but also to make sure that those who were online, that it did serve humanity. It was that it was provided benefit rather than produce problems. So in a way, I think the people I work with, the values and the sense of direction are the norm.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So, Tim, as the industry has evolved, it continues to provide countless benefits to millions of people. ICT is impacting nearly every aspect of human life, with innovations happening each day in every field. However, there are numerous challenges that we face in order for the industry to fully realize its potential for benefiting everyone on Earth. So you mentioned a little bit earlier that the World Wide Web Foundation, which was founded by you and Rosemary, am I pronouncing Leith correctly?
Leith, yeah, Leith is good.
Oh, okay, thank you. So you talked about the contract for the web to serve as to save the web from destructive effects of abusive discrimination, political manipulation, and other threats that now plague the online world. This contract is intended to make the web serve humanity, as you mentioned, and knowledge and democracy. So the contract for the web, we noticed has an enormous amount of high-profile organizations and companies, including my organization, WCIT, the one I belong to. So before I ask you to further comment on the contract for the web, I found a quote that I'd like to share with the audience that I think is very important. And I believe you made this quote about 2 years ago. I quote, "It's understandable that many people feel afraid and unsure if the web is really a force for good. But given how much the web has changed in the past 30 years, it would be defeatist and unimaginative to assume that the web, as we know it, can't be changed for the better for the next 30 years. Now, if we give up building a better web now, then the the web will have not failed us, we will have failed the web. So please expound on that comment and give us more information on the contract for the web, because it seems to me that the contract for the web is answering that hypothesis in terms of these are the guidelines that are in place for everybody to look at. So please.
Right. Yes. Thanks for bringing it up. The contract for the web is about a whole bunch of people getting together in working groups and looking at the full spectrum of issues with the web but also potential. That first quote is really I'm saying don't imagine that the web is now frozen in stone, because it's been changing every moment over the last 30 years. And so it will be changing. Now we can take charge. When you look at a social network, if you go to a social network and you're a feminist blogger and you find that way that social network operates, it makes it intolerable because of the way people can lay into you and make your life horrible. Well, step back. If you're a programmer, imagine writing your own social network. Take that social network, you can cut it, break out a whole bunch of open source code to make the pieces, and start building it. And think about how that social network could be just as fun, just as exciting, but actually make it so that it is better in that it will promote love and understanding rather than nastiness, for example. So some of these things, maybe you can keep a lot of the code from the original social network, but actually just change the algorithm in the middle so that instead of emphasizing nastiness, it emphasizes niceness. So, for example, maybe you would make it so that instead of just maximizing the number of people that stay on long time, they stay on, you try to maximize the actual benefit people have got as human beings from it. And then maybe you'll find that is actually a better business model than the original. So we can, our message is we can change it. The contract for the web is a shared vision, because all of the things we have to think about, from getting people who are not online, and there's a lot to think about. So this shared vision, this roadmap for the web, it is a code of contract, because it's about, it's not just, it's just a mantra. It's not just a mantra. It's not enough. Easy to say freedom, but actually the contract for the web is about, we need governments to be involved and to do the right thing. We need corporations to do the right thing, and we need individuals to do the right thing. To a certain extent, it's like a sort of social contract between these three very powerful parties, that if governments do keep the internet on, if governments do respect the autonomy of companies and of individuals, and if corporations do allow people to compete over their fiber, over their cable with net neutrality and things like this. If lots of things have to happen, then then we will all work together to produce a web, which is much better. So the contract's been has endorsed by 1,400 countries and 14,000 individuals, including your own organization. The pilot project which came out of it was a project looking at the abuse of women and girls, and some work on that, doing an analysis, taking the covers off what was going on, actually led to some social networks changing elements of the design to make it safer to be a woman online. So that was on the next. So that was a project which a lot of people were really were very. A lot of people joined in, a lot of collaborators. I think a lot of people thought that was valuable. Next phase, which is going to be announced, I think, next week, is that I'll let you know now. It's going to be about dark patterns. So dark patterns are a new phenomenon that people. Well, the word is new. When a website manipulates you by just the user interface language, abusing the user interface language by leaving the button that you should press to stop colored green for go, and switching the number and hiding the unsubscribe button and all these sort of the classic things that people do. So we're looking at dark patterns, doing research into dark patterns, and categorizing them and calling people on them. So the Web Foundation Tech Policy Design Lab is doing that, and so there's a lot of work to do, but we have a plan, and the contract for the web is the structure, and dark patterns is the next big chunk we're going to bite off.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you, sir. In recent years, a backlash referred to techlash has emerged, marked by increasing enmity toward large Silicon Valley platform technology companies. For many years, Silicon Valley was characterized by techno-optimism, a belief that technology can continually be improved and can improve the lives of people around the world, making lives better. A dramatic turnaround has taken place with the revelation of the election manipulation, personal data collection abuse, misleading and false information, hoaxes and fake news, all becoming too commonplace in social media. Please let us know your thoughts on how best to address the challenges of social media in general that pose to the internet, society, and democracy as a whole.
Well, for one thing, there is a lot of good stuff out there. And so if the social network that you've joined you find is nasty, is not a good place to be, or you're finding that there's more and more fake news out there than real news, then yes, if you're a programmer, make your own social network. But there are a bunch of social networks out there which don't have that problem. There are places which are not ad funded at all. There's a sort of a myth in Silicon Valley that the way Facebook and Instagram could work is the only business model for the web. But in fact, there are lots of companies out there demonstrating that there are lots of other business models that people will in fact be prepared to pay for places to keep their data. Things like Dropbox and G Drive, places where you can put your data, and it won't be spied on. And so there are companies out there. There are lots of companies out there where the business model is not spying on people. So in general, the solution is to build a new world, and in particular, the solid project, which is the new wave, if you like, it's the third wave of the web, but I think is a really great sort of foundation for that, because it starts off from the spirit of it is you deserve your own data. Your data belongs to you, and then the technology underneath that is here. You can have a solid pod, and your solid pod will be managed by people who respect that you control your data and you can share anything with anybody. And it turns out to be very empowering when you can share anything with anybody across, doesn't matter whether they've joined this social network or that social network. In the solid world, then you can share anything with anybody. So you can collaborate with anybody. We're hoping that this will result in all kinds of great solid apps, which end up solving lots of serious problems like for climate change and so on.
Tim, you formed a company called Inrupt to help build a commercial ecosystem to fuel a project, as you already mentioned, called Solid at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. My understanding is the project aims to radically change the way applications work today, resulting in the true data ownership as well as improved privacy. So you mentioned a little bit about this. How would that project work? Please provide us with more detail on that.
So the project adds new standards to the web stack, and it's sort of not rocket science, because the standards it's using are basically things that already exist. If you want to share anything with anybody, then you have to have a concept of global ID. At the moment, people log in with Facebook or log in with Google. When you log in with Solid, it doesn't matter who you log in, who is providing your identity, it'll be compatible across the solid spectrum. So that's already quite a big change for the web, that you will have a concept of global ID. So I can, you give me your solid ID, and then later I can go back and share the photographs I've taken at our event with you just by having your ID. And I can put you in groups and so on. So solid is about global standards for access control and global standards for logon. And then underneath that, it makes this the architectural step of saying, actually, the apps and the data stores are going to be separate. So when you run an app, the first thing it'll say is, hey, Jim, where do you want this? So where do you want these pictures you're taking stored? And you'll say, well, these are family photographs. So I'm going to put them on my family pod. And so the app, which is taking the photographs or making a slideshow, is separate from the pod. But then you can then give your family access to the photographs in your pod, and then they can use different because of all the interoperability of the solid specs at the application level. Then they will be then your family will be able to go use all kinds of different apps for looking for editing the photos and commenting on them and watching different slideshows and so on mobile and on laptops and so on. So when we split the apps from the data store, it means that we have to have another standard. It's called the solid protocol, which is the one where the app talks to it asks you where your pod is, and then it uses the solid protocol across the net to store data in real time. So just as if it's a calendar app stores data in a calendar, or a photo app stores data in a photo. Every app stores data in your solid pod, and the solid pod is, because it's this very generic store, any app can store data in it, and the solid pod doesn't have to worry about what app is stored. So from the developer's point of view, if you're a developer, this means you can develop a solid app and just run it on all of the solid pods without having to write any backend code. So, although the business logic from the backend code is moved into the app. And so that also is really exciting. It makes writing apps really, really powerful. So it's powerful for developers writing apps. It's powerful for users because they have an amount of control they've never had before over their own data, which is basically their own lives nowadays. And it's and so it's gives and it's actually also for companies like if you run a pizza shop and somebody comes to logs on with their solid pod and they have their favorite type of pizza and they have their allergens and in their pod, then that's really easy for you because you're a pizza shop. You're not in the business of trying to manipulate them based on the data. You're just making pizza, and you can store which pizzas they've ordered in their solid pod and let them share that with other pizza companies. And you can use the fact they've got the allergens in the pod for safety, and just everything runs smoother. And it saves, if you're running a pizza store, you don't have to manage all that personal data. And which of course is huge, gives you huge legal liability if you do manage it yourself.
I'm sure all the pizza owners in the world will be thankful to hear this information.
Yeah, raise your hand in the audience if you have a pizza store.
Pizza, okay.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Tim, from a WCIT colleague, Andres Halverson. He asks, Sir Tim, you have warned that artificial intelligence could become the masters of the universe, taking over high-level decision-making at companies with potentially frightening consequences. Given AI actual decision-making authority has a huge implications on our economic systems and social norms. And as you well know, there are others, luminaries such as yourself, who have very similar concerns about AI. So what's the best way to address the challenges caused by the rapid development of AI technologies?
Well, yeah, one thing, let's talk about this a lot. And I think, because philosophically, some say it may take longer than we thought, but philosophically, you have to imagine that if we build machines which are more and more smart, then they will get to a point when they get smarter than us. And so that is logically a conclusion you have to come to. And then when you get the machines which are smarter than us, obviously, then what happens if there are various horror scenarios when the computers, if they decide that actually they should replace us, for example, or all kinds of. But for one thing, all my friends who make robots, they say, Tim, don't be silly. It's so difficult. Don't you know how difficult it is to make a robot? Like robot. They're not going to take over the world. They can hardly get upstairs. So there are some things which it is difficult, but it's not about making a robot. And I think if you've watched some of the AI movies, like somehow AI movies, they assume that the AI to take over the world, it has to be humanoid, and it has to be particularly female and gorgeous and blonde. Okay, so there's what's the movie about the AI being having a beautiful humanoid female gorgeous blonde body and using its wiles to get around the people who look after it. But when you look at never mind robots, just think about how an investment company is run, for example. Modern investing, if you're a fast trading company, fast trading on the internet is something which computers can do and people can't. So basically, humans need to apply for fast trading positions, and so a lot of investment decisions are made by AI. And so AI have a lot of power. And are basically the most respected intelligence in some investment companies. So if I had to write a movie about the AI taking over, then it would be one in which the AI in an investment company starts creating new companies. So it wouldn't be robots taking over the world; it would be companies taking over the world, and companies which create themselves by going to the Open API Companies House in London and creating, for example, to create new companies. And when they create companies, they bring down a piece of cloud, increase it, and then make a new version of themselves. So you end up with companies, artificially intelligent companies, reproducing out there in company land. That's the movie that I'd want to make.
I guess we have to stay tuned. There's a lot of potential good and danger out there, I guess. So, all right. So,
well, one of the things to do short term is to make sure that people who do the Web Foundation will encourage you to make your algorithms public. So, let's have a bit discussion about what this AI does. Let's have that in discussion informed by the algorithms which should be out there in the open.
Tim, with just over one half the world now being online, are you optimistic that the other half will also ultimately be connected? If so, when is this likely to happen, and what needs to take place for us to achieve this truly global, interconnected community? What do we need to do?
Well, to a certain extent, yes, it is happening. The number of people online is increasing. It has been a question of both getting sufficiently affordable devices and sufficiently affordable connections, data plans. The devices, since the Web Foundation has been in the business of looking at this, the cost of devices has become less significant. So it's really just about the cost of data plan. So we have been saying, should we get two for one? You should get 2 gigabytes per month for 1% of your monthly salary. That's a goal. So really, it's about affordability, getting the people a lot of people who are not online because they are poor. There are some who are not online because they're illiterate. There are some who just can't get access because they're in rural areas. And I think one of the things we'll see the number of people online going up. It won't get to 100 anytime soon, but as it gets closer to 80%, 90%, then we'll find the issues involved become very different, because the issues of getting somebody online when they're in a remote rural area, for example, will be very different. So we'll have to move in lower for satellite technology, but that's the thing. That's the tool we have, and so I hope it will lead to great diversity of participation in the web.
Okay, Tim, on that subject, do you think 10 years, 20 years out, 50 years? Where are we looking at that 80 to 90% penetration?
I'm hoping that we'll get 80% penetration in 5 years.
All right.
I never make predictions. I only say things that I would hope. And then the last 10, it'll be difficult. People who do make predictions found that last few years, in fact, those predictions, unfortunately, the rollout has been a little bit less than anticipated. So the ITUs, not figures. We were on a curve, and the curve was a little bit lower than we hoped.
Mm-hmm. Tim, as you know, there are millions of people who are identified as persons with disabilities. We need to encourage those developing new applications to consider this group in their initial planning rather than going back to retrofit products and services for this community. So what are your thoughts here, please?
Well, definitely this is when you're looking at when you're using web standards like HTML and so on, then they came from WCIT.org, go to the Web Consortium, and WCIT.org/WAY/Web Accessibility Initiative is your friend, is your source. There are guidelines for making a website, guidelines for making a web browser, guidelines for making tools, and so yes, accessibility is really important, and it's been so the Web Consortium has been working on accessibility. So do get involved in the work of WAY, help them. It is hard work. You have to review all of the huge amount of web technology. There are new standards being produced every moment, and so we need people who understand accessibility in the accessibility community to review that stuff when it comes out. Internationalization, of course, is also important, and diversity and inclusion also are things which you need to take into account when you design your stuff.
That's very helpful. Thank you, sir. So as mentioned, Tim, ICT is impacting nearly every aspect of human life. The country hosting this event, as you know, is Bangladesh. I'd like to highlight Bangladesh to illustrate the enormous progress that this nation has achieved through ICT. Bangladesh is one of only 2 South Asian economies to register growth in 2020, despite the global recession. This year, Bangladesh has met for the second time all 3 of the eligibility criteria for graduation into developing nation status using income, human asset index, and in the economy. The key ingredients behind the growth has been smartly utilized ICT to spur growth in all sectors. I think you'd be interested to know that 2 million Bangladeshis have joined the ranks of the middle class each year. And Bangladesh has over 150 universities from where 500,000 college graduates enter the workforce each year. Thousands of these digital savvy youths are entering the IT and the IT-enabled services industry in different capacities, as IT professionals, as freelancers, even as startup founders. I found fascinating that the total population of Bangladesh is over 164 million people with 50% of the population under the age of 25. And Bangladesh is the world's second largest source of digital workforce. This is truly a nation undergoing digital transformation, enabled by ICT. As mentioned, Bangladesh is a forward-looking society with millions of smart and energetic young people. Many thousands of these young people from Bangladesh and from around the world will be viewing this session. Many of them are either already in or will be going into the ICT industry. And many of them have dreams of becoming the next Sir Tim Berners-Lee. I am sure that they're very interested in hearing your advice regarding career as well as life advice in general. So please, what is your recommendation for the younger generations, whether they are in the business or not? What do you recommend as we go forward?
Well, I suppose part of it, one thing to say is whether you're in the business or not, whether you are somebody who understands how to code is one of the big questions. So one of the things, a good thing to do for Bangladesh is to make sure you give your kids, particularly your girls, the chance to play with computers early, and not just play with computers as users, but to understand that these are things you can code, to realize that when you look at a computer, every pixel on that screen has been programmed. It's been put by some program that somebody wrote. And if you think that you prefer for that computer to look different, that program to work differently, well, you can go, somebody programmed that, and you can make your own programming. That's sort of one of the messages I got from my mum and dad when they were playing with their earliest computers. Now these computers you've got are sufficiently powerful, you can do all kinds of useful things. So do introduce kids, especially young women, to coding and help them produce clubs where they can learn to code. We need people coding, by the way, not just because we need computer scientists in the workforce. It means we need people, and we need the judges and lawyers. We need the people in parliament to be able to code. We need enough people who understand how a computer works so that they can write laws which make sense. We've had a bunch of, it's hard. We've got, in Europe, we have a lot of politicians in the US, a lot of politicians that don't really understand what a computer is, maybe, and they certainly don't code. So when we get more and more people who do understand it, who can code a computer, they understand what's possible when we make regulations about them, those regulations will make a whole lot more sense. It's important to make regulations about that because sometimes there's bad things that you can stop by code. Sometimes the computer can stop something bad happening, but sometimes it isn't. There's the other. There's some things that you just have to make laws against, and so it's not just about a question of rolling out new tech. It's a question about rolling out policy. Make sure your policy, for example, it gives people access to the internet. Make sure that your government isn't allowed to turn it off, even if there's a lot of discussion around an election. Okay, make sure the governments keep it on. So that's make sure your government keeps that internet on, and use it locally, use it globally. In a way, if you look at yourself as a sort of there's a person of one, you think of yourself as a group of one, and then maybe your family as a group of 10, and your extended family as a group of 100, and then people are in school, there's 1,000. There are lots of groups, and then Bangladesh is in there as a big group, and then the planet as a whole is a group of around 10 to the power 11. So with 10 with 11 zeros on that. So that's all these different scales are scales where you could think about being, you should spend a bit of thinking. It's good to spend a bit of time thinking about your local scale, a bit of time thinking about the global scale, spend some time thinking about your country, some time thinking about your neighborhood. So that, when you do that, and that when you write code which allows people to do that as well, then you'll build a world which is in a way has got lots of different organizations at different scales involved. Some call that a scale-free or a fractal world mathematically. A fractal world is a sort of GUI world with things that organizations, lots of different sizes. I think it's a really useful one to build, useful one to be involved in. So, and part of that will involve you reaching out to people who are not just in your local group and the family, a little bit, but reaching out a little bit further across a cultural boundary and figuring out how they tick. That's the sort of world I think we need to build. So I'd encourage you to work in that direction. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. As we wind down, Tim, how do you see yourself having the most positive impact on the development of a democratizing, ethical, safe, and universal accessible internet going forward? What is your main goal and role, and how are you working now?
Well, there's lots of things that all need to happen. So the WCC was the first organization I started. We need the web standards to evolve and be really powerful. The things that the Web Foundation is doing important. There's an Open Data Institute in London is helping everybody understand data, make data more effective on the web. And then the Solid movement is in a way the most advanced level. The way, if you like, it's a third take on the web, where this time hopefully it'll be much more powerful for individuals. And so I think, in a way, I wouldn't pick one. Obviously, Solid it's my day job. It's the most exciting thing, but it's really important always when you're working on the most exciting thing to spend a certain amount of time making sure that the underlying infrastructure is open and clean, making sure your government's not interfering with it. So if you use the web and develop stuff for the web, in most of the time, you still have to spend some time also fighting for it and fighting to keep it open.
Okay. Lastly, Tim, what does the future hold for the digital age? Will the World Wide Web and the internet ever reach their full potential to make the world a better place for everyone?
Well, that's asking me to give a prediction as to whether we will or not. And I don't give predictions because you could be wrong. I will say what I hope, and yeah, I hope that we're successful. I hope that we all put our collective minds and effort and energy together, and we do achieve a World Web which allows us to collaborate at lots of different scales, which allows us through collaboration on the web to solve the huge problems of particularly climate change at the moment. And so I hope people look back at the way we solve climate change as a way we use technology, but by making really powerful collaborative tools and systems which respected people from other walks of life and other cultures, so that we were more inclined to be collaborative and to help each other, because the climate change and the problems around it are really serious. They're urgent, and all our development around ICT needs to be directed in that direction.
Tim, I cannot thank you enough for spending your valuable time with us today and for your continuing contributions to mankind. Please keep up the great work. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Thanks, Jim, for the questions. It's been good to chat.
Thank you, sir.